Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we got several things going on. We got NATO doing NATO things. John Bolton's home was raided. We got Flex Limited, or whatever the hell it is. The U.S. electronics company's been blown to smithereens. Let's talk. Hello, I'm just looking up the John Bolton here. All right, let's get going. And couple of news items. There's I can't cover everything now. Certainly, the Venezuela issue is major. We want to talk about that, but let's start here. John Bolton. Let's start with John Bolton. Let's start there, and then we'll go on to Russia, Ukraine from there. Okay, the FBI has raided the home and office of John Bolton, the renowned foreign policy hawk and a former national security advisor to President Trump. Trump has said he knew nothing about the raids and only learned of them from television. Here's the thing you need to know. So, my understanding is this. Apparently, John Bolton had a book, and there may or may not have been information in the book that was classified that there were people who apparently tried to get him from putting certain things in the book, and he did it anyway. There was at one point there was an investigation opened against John Bolton. I remember that, and that was for his handling of classified information. And apparently, somewhere in there during the Biden administration, they dropped it or stopped going after it or whatever. At any rate, he was one of Biden's boys, so they ended the investigation. It appears to me, I may be wrong. It appears to me that, in a nutshell, the Trump people have decided to reopen the investigation. I think that's really basically what we're looking at it here. I don't think it's a new investigation. I don't think it's something new. I think they are simply, and from the perspective of, PR, that's probably their best move if they want to go after Bolton, because John Bolton, he's probably dirty. As the hard rider says, well, if anyone deserved an FBI raid, it was John Bolton, and it takes me back to, remember, was it Medea Benjamin's house? I think Max Blumenthal's house, where, they came up with, Scott Ritter's house, where, they had SWAT teams and people. And I remember the Uhuru movement, the Uhuru 3. They come to these unarmed people who meant nobody. What was the guy's name that worked for Nixon? Roger Stone. Here are people who, probably don't have weapons of much in their house, who really at this stage in their lives, they don't present a threat to anyone. They could have really, in all of those cases, they could have come up and knocked on the door and said, we have a warrant, but they pretended like, oh, well, these people are some kind of a threat. They made a big public relations show out of it. Well, apparently they didn't do that with Bolton today, and I think that's a good thing. I don't look, I got no love for John Bolton. I think he's a warmongering lunatic, but hopefully it was conducted in a professional and respectful manner. I think that this guy is a lowlife, and in my opinion, it will have to be proven. But in my opinion, if we know John Bolton, he probably violated every law. Here's a psychotic psychopath who feels entitled and above the law, and well, I can do whatever I want. I'm John Bolton. I don't have to go by the law. I'll just do whatever I want. Well, it looks to me as though that has run out. My tie's all over the darn place, so I'm going to try to get that straight here real quick. Yeah, so John Bolton felt that he could do whatever the hell he wanted, and apparently that's coming to an end. Going back and choosing an old investigation that was open before him, and then reopening that investigation. I guess they can, the Trump people can then say, hey, we didn't start this. We didn't open an investigation. We're not trying to get revenge against this guy. There was already an investigation. We examined it. We saw what appeared to be potential crimes. And here's the bottom line. Anytime you have an investigation, defense will challenge the predicate for the investigation, right? Defense will always challenge, did you have a legitimate reason to start the investigation? And so the Trump people, should they choose to charge, they will, have the strength of saying, hey, let's look at this, why the people under Biden or whoever did this, because we didn't do it. They can even call them in. Of course, they would call them in to testify as to why they started the investigation. So I think it's strategically speaking, it's a wise move. So let's continue. So that's John Bolton. I also think that, and this is important to understand, even though God only knows if negotiations with the Russians are going to go anywhere, if Trump's going to screw it up at some point, if his team's going to screw it up, who knows? We don't know at this point. You'd have to bet against the U.S. being able to find common ground with the Russians. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that they intend to. If they're going to do that, they know good and damn well that the mainstream media and all of the allies of the deep state and whoever else, the anti-Russia clique, excuse me for yawning. I woke up like 3 o'clock in the morning and couldn't get back to sleep for like hours. I don't know how that happens sometimes. At any rate, so I'm probably a little sleepy. I think strategically speaking, what the Trump team wants to do is get Russiagate off their back so that they don't have to worry about the anti-Russia minions out there calling them, saying, oh, Trump worked for Putin and blah, blah, blah. They want to create an environment where these people are afraid to go after them for that. And therefore, it gives them the political cover of, what's the word I'm looking for? It gives them the political cover that they need to negotiate with the Russians free from, or at least with minimal attacks from the U.S. press and the anti-Russia hawk. So I think there's a strategy there to discredit Russiagate, and B, to put the fear of God in people who would try to revive Russiagate. I think that's the game. We shall see. All right, so that's John Bolton. I suspect, as someone else in the chat said, Comey's next. I suspect we're going to be looking at the names, 2 names that I think, or 3 names that I think. Comey, I think they're going to get him for leaks. I think they're definitely going to get Comey for leaking. Brennan, Comey and Brennan probably lying to Congress and leaking. Those are the kind of things they're looking at them. And then some of the internal things, let's not forget, to me, there's an obvious charge, and that would be the FISA warrant, deliberately putting things in the FISA warrant that they knew were untrue, misleading the FISA court, and then misleading Congress, lying to Congress, saying, oh no, we didn't use the Carter Page stuff, or we didn't use the Steele document as the foundation for the FISA warrant, when in fact they did, and they knew they did, and they admitted that they did. I think they're going to go after them for some of the things they did in the ICA, the assessment that they put out in January of 2017, which was the worst piece of garbage I've ever seen. Between that and the Steele dossier, I don't know which is the worst piece of garbage I've seen. So that's what's going on there. And let me say this, people get so caught up on Trump or Biden or this person. Trump is a liar. Trump is this. Trump is that. And here's, because somebody put in, first of all, Trump's a liar. Here's what I have to say. He's a politician. Somebody's got to say that a politician is a liar. Oh, the president, he's a liar. Oh, and other breaking news, water is still wet and fire is still hot. Ice is still cold, and politicians are liars. So I guess that's shocking news to some. To me, it is axiomatic. It is self-evident to me. It is not something that is remarkable to me, that it deserves a remark. Hey, did you believe it? The president of the United States lied and he's starting a war. No, get out of here. Boy, you sniffed that one out, Sherlock Holmes. But at any rate, so let's continue. All right. So what we have, I said NATO's delusional, but it's not really delusion. It's something really different. It's something really different than that. And that is that the position of NATO is of the leadership, the Macrons and Starmers and Merzes and Snoobs and all these other clowns, right? Their position is pretty clear. We must continue the conflict in Ukraine. We have a narrative, right? We have a position that we're taking. Notwithstanding reality, what can happen and what can't happen, we're sticking with that position. And one thing that's interesting about the position of the EU clowns, and that is there's a reckless disregard for the lives of Ukrainians that is implicit in their position, because Ukrainians are dying, and a lot of them are dying, and the numbers are coming out and they're horrifying and astronomical, right? Somebody says Garland's channel's been 87,000 subs per month. So yeah, and probably will be, like 20 years from now. Hey, look, how many has Garland got any subs? Oh, I think he's lost 3. He hasn't gained any. In 87,000 years, I'll have 87,000 subs. That's kind of the way YouTube works. If you say things they don't like. But at any rate, so the position of the EU, the first and foremost you got to understand is that they see the Ukrainians as disposable. They are going to fight to the last Ukrainian. So if anybody says perhaps, now we see there are articles that say like upwards of 70%, 69 or 70% of polls of Ukrainians want the war over, but 100% of European leaders, of course, I'm saying, being facetious here, but close to it. What is it? Fico and Orban are kind of it, but all of the Western European leaders wanted to continue. Just think about this. The Ukrainian people, 69%, more than 2/3, right? 7/10, shall we say, right, of them are like, yeah, we'd like a negotiated settlement. But somehow the Western Europeans say we must support the Ukrainians by continuing a war, even though 7 out of 10 Ukrainians don't want the war to continue. So you want to continue, continue the war in Ukraine to support the Ukrainians, even though the Ukrainians don't like that kind of support. And can you blame them? They're the ones being killed. But here's the reality: the Ukrainians were always cannon fodder. They were always NATO cannon fodder. And since they are, in fact, NATO cannon fodder, why should anything change for NATO? If 100% of the Ukrainians say we don't want to fight, NATO will still say, shut up. Yes, you do. In other words, you don't get a say in this. We fixed you up. We armed you up to fight the Russians, and you'll probably all get killed. But that's your job. We don't care about your lives. You are there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to die in service to the European Union. The EU has a history of doing this, and they ain't going to stop doing it with Ukrainians. So they're saying, look, I'll put it like this. There's 2 ways to look at it. Number one, we must impose a settlement on Russia. Russia's got to take this. Russia, you're going to have to, even though you're winning, you're going to have to negotiate as though you've lost. That's one way to look at it if you take things at face value. The other way to look at it is this: they want the war to continue. And if Russia says, we'll take the deal that we have as long as you don't offer us a glass of water, they'll say, well, in that case, we're offering you a glass of water. Okay, we'll drink the water then. Then we'll take the deal with the glass of water as long as you don't offer us a glass of orange juice. So orange juice will kill the deal? Yeah, then we'll offer you orange juice. In other words, you get what I'm saying. There's one way to look at it is that they are being genuine. They really believe in what they're saying, and they are going to push back against Russia because they somehow believe in the injustice of what Russia's doing. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is this: they just want the war to keep going. So what they're saying to Trump is this: Trump, you got to keep the war going. No matter what, we got to find a way to keep this war going. Yes, Ukrainians are getting killed. Great, fine. Who cares? That's their job. We got to keep this war going, because if we keep this war going, if we don't keep this war going, what are we going to say to our people? They're going to ask us, well, I thought the Russians after this war were going to keep going, and the Russians have a deal and they're not trying to keep going. Perhaps we've been had, right? They can't afford that. They can't explain, as Ricky Riccardi would say, if this war stops, Macron, Starmer, and Merritt got some splaining to do. They got some splaining to do, and they got no answers. And other things are going to come up. People are going to ask them about the economy. Then people are going to say, we want Russian oil and stuff back. The companies, corporations are going to say, we want to go back to Russia and get into the Russian market. And oh, the problems are legion. You know, they'll have so many problems, everything they have, and they will be thoroughly discredited in the worst kind of way. And everybody will look at them and say, now we got to start investigating your money. I think you're crooked. What happens? They got to look at, and let's say this is John Bolton. They got to look at this John Bolton thing with horror. If you're Macron and Starmer, if you're Merritt's and these clowns, right? What happens if somebody starts saying, well, you know, what's going on with Starmer? That's kind of weird. Some Ukrainian toy boys were burning down your cars. Did you have some untoward action with these Ukrainian boys? They may be asking Macron some unquestionable, some uncomfortable questions about a certain bag of which might or not have been a illicit subject on a train. So here's my thing. They may start looking at this money and say, boy, a whole lot of millions sure flowed into Ukraine. Let's start looking at where some of it flowed out of Ukraine, whose pockets it went into. They can't afford that. They can't afford that. What happens if the AfD, what if some of these other, look, I'm a lefty, so I'm not an AfD fan, but if the German people want to elect whoever, the party of whatever, the German people get to vote for who they want to vote for. And what happens if these anti-EU, Eurosceptic, anti-NATO parties start to gain power? The people apparently are sick of this. Once that movement, once the Eurosceptic movement starts to gain traction politically in Europe, that's it for the EU. And all of these people that are making major dollars working at the EU headquarters or working at the NATO headquarters. See what I'm saying? So all I'm saying is this. The bottom line is the people in NATO have a lot more reasons to appear to be delusional. They got a lot at stake, and they could be caught up in a lot of criminal activity and held accountable for the decisions that they've made and perhaps the corruption that they've been involved in. And so they'd rather just try to keep the war going, because as long as the war's going, they don't have to deal with that. So that's something to keep in mind there, I think. And I think what we're looking at is the Russians, you know, I say the Russians, Moscow stiffens. That's really not really real, not really true for this reason. Moscow's not stiffening, to be frank. Moscow's just consistent. You know, the Trump, he's, and I see this with Trump. It seems to me that whoever's in the room with Trump, whoever he's talking to, he kind of tells them what they want to hear. Because it seems to me the Trump team, they want an out and they're trying to get one. And when the Europeans are in there, they'll tell them, kind of imply that they're going to go along with them, but they won't really. And then they'll walk it back. I mean, the Trump, if you think about this, have you ever seen an administration that walks things back as much as Trump? I mean, day to day, they say something, they walk it back. They say something about Ukraine, they walk it back. They say something about Russia, they walk it back. Zelensky's is a dictator. Oh no, did I say that? Putin's trying to get a deal. Oh, the Russians are hard to deal with. The Russians are easy to deal with. The Ukrainians are hard to deal with. Well, that's it. We're walking out. If we don't get this, we're leaving. Well, we're going to be with Ukraine to the bitter end. Oh, you know what? Europe is going to step. They're like, they must have calluses on their feet. For the Trump team, they must all wear, you know, comfortable sneakers because they're constantly walking up, walking back. And I think part of that is because they've got a guy in charge who's kind of unstable. Trump, and I'm not saying Trump's crazy or he's not crazy or anything like this. This is not a evaluation of Trump's emotional and or psychological capabilities and abilities. I'm just saying he's not a stable person. That's not saying there's something mentally wrong with him. There could be, there could not. When I say he's not stable, I mean he's not consistent. He's not the word integrity, right? What is integrity? It's integrating your words with your actions. What you say is what you are. You communicate what you feel, what you want to believe, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, and you've made a decision. Hey, Garland, will you do that? And I think about it. Well, why would I do that? Well, we need you to do that for this reason, that reason, that reason, and this reason. And I think about it and I make a decision based on what I think is best. And then I say, look, I'm not going down that road, guys. Well, why not, Garland? We really want you to do that. I'm not going down that road, and let me tell you why. And I can explain to them. I have taken a position that they may not like or they may like, but I can explain to them what my position is, why I took that position, and I'm going to stand by it. Who did that? The Russians. The Russians can clearly explain their position. And they're stable. Putin is stable. He has a stable grip on powers, 87% approval rating. So the people are behind him and the people trust him in Russia. He has a stable government. Lavrov, a man who is well trained, who spent a lot of years in diplomacy, knows what he's doing. He's respected around the world. He's consistent, and he'll tell you what he's going to do, and he'll explain why. Okay? He's a good, quality, old school, well trained, experienced diplomat. He's stable. If you're from another country, if you're from India, China, Pakistan, UAE, whatever, and you talk with Lavrov, you know he speaks for Putin. You know he speaks for the Russian people because he has the authority, and you know his word is his bond, right? Word is bond, as they say. His word is his bond. If he says we can't do it, he's going to have to tell you we can't do that. You may not like it, you may like it, but he's going to tell you Putin and crew, his people, they're stable. Their people support them. They got their people in power throughout. They are making decisions as to what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. There's a lot of stability there. And when they tell you we are not or we are, that's where they are. Could they change? Sure, they're nimble, but for the most part, they have a compass. They have a true north. This is what we're going. And what was the compass and the true north of the SMO? It was there's an existential threat. NATO has expanded to our border, and we must address that. That is the foundation. An existential threat. NATO is at our border. We got to address that. We are very vulnerable if NATO takes over Ukraine. Right? That's it. If NATO gets to Ukraine, it is a security risk for us that we will not allow. We'll fight first. We can't afford that. Sometimes people have, as I said, self-defense. Sometimes the guy may put his hand out, says, I don't want any trouble. If you come within that, he reserves the right to strike first. He's like, you're close enough that you can harm me. You're close enough that you can strike me. You can knife me. You can knee me in the groin. You can do something before I have a chance. I'm not going to take that chance. If I've told you I'm concerned about my safety and I've held my hand out and you come within that, I now reserve the right to strike first, right? That's where the Russians are. Hey, man, we have a strategic border, and that's Ukraine. And we are warning you over and over. If you encroach upon our strategic border, we reserve the right to strike first. We will advise you. We will try to work it out. You come in there, you got to fight. Well, the West said we're coming in anyway. Well, the Russians just maintained their word. Now, once they started the special military operation, they made clear that they had a set of goals. And they've said, I remember very early in the SMO when Macron was still talking with Putin, and Putin said to Macron, we will achieve our goals either through diplomacy or force of arms. And that's where we are, and that's where we've been ever since. They've got a list of goals, and they're not willing to change those goals because it truly is existential to them. It truly is existential. They've been attacked through Ukraine before. They're not willing to wait around. And the United States has clearly shown malicious intent towards them. Right? So the U.S. is around their border acting in malevolent ways. And they're like, nah, guys, this is not good. Hey, what? You can do some things. Yeah, you're fooling around the Caucasus. We don't like it. We ain't attacking you yet. But when it comes to Ukraine, you come there. Niet means niet, brother. Niet means niet. And so here we are. So Russia is, I said they're stiffening their spine. No, they're not really. It's not getting stiffer. They're holding firm. Their situation is that this is important. We can't afford to. There are things we can talk about, but when it comes to allowing you to get in Ukraine, that's something we can't talk about. We're not going to do it. It's up to you to figure out how you're going to react to what we're going to do. And that's something you have to do in life sometimes. Sometimes people are doing things, bothering you, upsetting you, angering you, threatening you, whatever, right? But sometimes there are times when you simply have to make a decision that you have boundaries, how far you will go. There's people that have broken up. I know of a couple that broke up because the man had a previous marriage. He had a son by his previous marriage, and his current wife, who was a piece of work, who is now his former wife, but she was really a piece of work. And ultimately, she said something very bad about his son. This is his son. And she called him a name, right? That little so and so, right? And to him, that was a deal breaker. He says, "Oh, wait a minute. You just insulted my son? Yeah. You don't insult the man's son." He was gone. And she tried to reconcile, and he said, "Nah." What was it? He had a boundary. I, have had instances in my life. I'm sure you have too, where things have happened, and you've had to draw the line. I know people have workplaces where something happened at their job, and they said, "I can't work here anymore." Where the people who have had employees that work for them, the employee crossed the line. They said, "You can't work here anymore. Not doing that. You did something that we can't overlook." Right? We've had friends. You know, I had a person who was a friend. This guy was like oligarch rich, to be quite frank. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was oligarch rich, and he was a friend. And I had some friends in DC, and we'd go travel and do things, and this guy would pay for everything, right? Let's just say he had some tendencies to dislike certain groups. I won't name the groups a lot. And he would always make statements about particular ethnic groups that he didn't like, right? He never said anything about my ethnic group, but I figured, whatever. But like we travel, and oh man, we go to the best of the best. And this guy, money was no object. He covered, he paid for it, he could care less, right? But I just got to a point where I'm like, you know what? That's not who I am. You know what I mean? That's not who I am. And I don't feel right about like associating with people who think like that, and they're like they hate particular ethnic groups or whatever. And I'm like, nah. And I ended up just kind of like drifting away. Like I'm not hanging with people like that. It was a boundary that I had. That's not me. It's not who I am. You know what I mean? For instance, I'm furious at Zionists, but like a couple of my best friends are Jewish people, and they're like, right. My brother was a converted Jew. He's passed away. God bless him. He had a year or 2 years ago, maybe he had prostate cancer and passed away. Right. My half brother, but he was a converted Jew when he was in the military. So what am I supposed to do? Oh, I hate my brother. No. So and let me tell you this. He was where we are when it comes to Israel. He was Jewish, but he was where we are. He was furious at Israel, and he was on behalf of the 100% on behalf of the Palestinians and all that kind of stuff. So my point is, you got to have boundaries. You got to decide where you stand. The Russians have boundaries. They decide where they stood, and they ain't going to change. And NATO is going to end up just fighting amongst itself. And I'll say this: I've told people, I've always my life, I like to play basketball, high school, community college. I played in community college. And then after I got out of community college, I played in, local leagues and had fun, with friends. And so I had a bunch of guys I played. I had a blast, right? And crap, I forgot where I was going with that. Too much going on. I got to stop reading the chat, because then I forget. Every time I look down and read the chat, I forget what the hell I'm talking about, but it comes back to me in a minute or so. But at any rate, so I guess my point is, the Russians are going to stay where they are, and they're going to maintain course and speed, and their adversaries are going to have to do what they got to do. Oh, I know what I was going to say. And when I've been playing, we'd play a game, and we played leagues. We had our little uniforms and referees and all, like the county leagues or the local leagues. I played in the league in Baltimore City, whatever. And ultimately, if you see the other team fighting, you won. I've been playing a team, and then you look and you see the other team start arguing amongst themselves. Anything, if you're playing soccer or whatever, when you see the other team arguing amongst themselves and your team is cohesive and you're not arguing amongst themselves, you're probably going to win. Well, guess what? Look at the NATO. The Europeans are just a mess. Got Orban and Fico and those kind of people. And the other side, you got the idiots and the lunatics like Macron and Starmer and Merz. You've got Trump here, who's opposed to, somewhat wants at least to get the hell out of this thing. He may have other very, very malevolent intentions, but he at least wants to get out to some extent. He doesn't want to be the one to take the loss. And inside of Trump's circle, they're all fighting it out. You got the military industrial complex, the think tank complex, Congress, the media, the Democrats, the Republican, establishment. You got all these people fighting it out. So on one side, you got all these people fighting it all out over what to do. And you got the Russians and their allies, the Chinas, the Indias, and all saying, hey, you know what? The Russians got a point here, and chill out and make a deal with them. So ultimately, kinetically speaking, in the real physical world, the Russians are going to win this thing on the battlefield. The strength of what's happening now is that the longer the West fights amongst itself, the more the Russians can force their point on the battlefield, and that's where the real victory is won. Till it gets to the point where the Ukrainians have little or no options other than to capitulate. They don't have the capacity to fight anymore. Attritional warfare. Make sure your opponent no longer has the capacity to resist, right? You get in a fight with somebody and you get their wrist and you break their wrist. And they try to, and you get them, you break the other wrist, you break an ankle, they're laying on the ground, they can't even walk, their eyes are poked, but they're injured, and then they no longer have the capacity to fight. You don't have to beat them anymore. You can walk away. You have removed their capacity to resist whatever you want to do, and absolutely to attack. Remove the capacity, the ability to attack, first and foremost. They can't do it. What the Russians are doing is, somebody said Bitten is a vampire book. No, actually, Bitten is about Lyme disease, and it's about how the government. Bitten's, the secret history of Lyme disease and biological weapons. That's one you might like. But at any rate, so as the Russians continue with their quest to firstly diminish the West's capability to project power onto its border by destroying Ukraine's proxy capability to launch strikes on it, to attack it, to take ground, or even to resist for both now and in the future. Remember, the Russians want to stop the Ukrainian army from being able to fight them now, but they want to hurt them so bad they can't come back and fight later. And they want to hurt them so bad they don't want to come back and fight later. So that if the West goes back to what's left of Ukraine and says, okay, let's get together for another round against Russia, that the Ukrainians will go, oh, crap. What against who? Yes, sir, we're getting the band back together. We're going to give you weapons and all kinds of missiles and tanks. And then we're going right across the Dnieper River. And the Russians are over there. We're going to get you guys all set up with nice, fresh, clean uniforms. And back we're going to attack the Russians. What do you think? And the Ukrainians are going to go, ow. Well, it sounds like a good plan. And I like, the basics of it. But as for now, I think we'll just sit this one out. The last time we went over there, we got torn to shreds, and there are very few of us left. And why does everybody in my town have a leg or an arm missing, or 2 legs and 2 arms missing? No, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'll just rest over here and grow some wheat or whatever the hell I can do. Goose step around. I got my Banderite picture in the house. Yeah, we hate the Russians, but we try. I don't think we need to go down that road again. That's what you want to do. You want to destroy their capability to fight, and you want to destroy their motivation to fight. So that if somebody so much as comes up to the Ukrainians and says, let's go back and fight the Russians, that they'll say, you better get the hell out of my house. If you think I'm going back across the Dnieper River to those lunatics, you got another thing coming. Ain't happening. Right? That's it. That's the plan. And that's where they're going. And the longer the NATO stays stupid, the longer this happens. And let's add this. In case you haven't been paying attention, the Russians are launching more subs, nuclear subs. They're launching more ships. They're launching icebreakers for the Arctic. They're building new Su-57s and S-400s and all. So as they diminish the capabilities of the Ukrainians, they're also expanding their military capabilities everywhere. They've got a huge Pacific fleet. They got the Black Sea fleet. So they're expanding their blue water fleet, their ability to defend themselves all over the place. Additionally, they're coming up with new kinds of missiles. The Oreshniks are in serial production. They're doing a lot of things to make them militarily more powerful. And of course, they're expanding their military industrial complex that is giving them ability to continue to grow their military potentials and capabilities, which is the perfect segue into the next story, if I can ever get to this. Austin, Texas, on the morning of August 21, 2025, is what's interesting. Flex is Industries. Our facility in Makachevo, Ukraine, was damaged during a missile strike. Our emergency protocols were executed to ensure the full evacuation of the site. A few employees and contractors were injured during the strike and remain in the hospital. Flex is headquartered in Austin, Texas, manufacturing partner of choice that helps a diverse customer base and build products that improve the world. Technology, innovation, supply chain, blah, 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 blah. Right? So what happens? It's an electronics company. My understanding is that, there we go, the Kiev Independent. Russia attacked a factory owned by U.S. company Flex Limited in Western Ukraine overnight. Less than a week after Russian President Vladimir Putin met U.S. President Donald Trump in Alaska. Flex Limited is an American publicly traded international company, one of the world's largest electronics manufacturers, operating in Ukraine since 2000. In 2012, it opened a 55,000 square meter plant that was targeted in Russia's attack. The plant employs 2,600 people. Listen to this. In his evening address, Zelensky accused Russia of purposely striking the U.S. facility. Yeah, amid ongoing peace talks. Yeah, the Russians knew exactly where they lobbed the missiles. We believe this was a deliberate strike, specifically on American-owned property, on American investments. Yeah. From what I hear, the suspicions are that this was they were making drone parts or drone something or other. Bottom line, they were in the supply chain for drones. And I guess Russia said, miss this supply chain for drones. We're going to go right up the chain and we're going to yank their friggin' chain. And they vaporized this factory. Here's what kills me. Zelensky, we think it was a deliberate strike. Those missiles are pretty accurate. Deliberate. Well, they might have been a meter off. Okay. They meant to hit in this room and they hit the next room over. But when you got that much high explosive, you don't have to be real precise. Okay. And my understanding is a number of missiles struck this facility. So it's silly for the Russians to strike a facility with deadly accurate missiles, and then you have to make the comment that, hey, we think they were actually aiming at this facility. We think it was an intentional strike. Yeah, I think Flex makes drones and drone parts and electronics that are used in the war against Russia. And I think Russia is going to blow stuff up like that. And look, it's war. You know, it's like this. We'll read one day that, okay, Trump and Putin are talking, whatever, right? And the next day, it's the Russians, amidst peace talk, the Russians still launch the drones and bombs. They're peace talks. You see, if there was a resolution, if they shook hands and signed a deal that they would fire no more drones and missiles, and they still fire drones and missiles, like, say, I don't know, Israel does, you would probably say, well, that wasn't right. You said you wouldn't do it, and you did it. But the fact that you're having peace talks does not preclude you from continuing on with the war. What is are the Ukrainian soldiers stopping? Hey, there's peace talks. Okay, the Ukrainian soldiers aren't going to fire at the Russians anymore. No, that's absurd. They act as though that there was some kind of a deal and that the Russians broke the deal. No, this is a war. And in a war, missiles, drones, bombs, gunshots, machine guns, mortars, whatever, if they can hit you in the head with a piece of wood, I don't like the idea of war. I'm opposed to it. But I ain't stupid. And I understand that in a war, I mean, this is PR crap. Just because you're talking to have peace talks does not mean that that war ain't going to continue. Most wars, there is some level of discussion between the sides during the war. They have some level of discussions. I'm just saying. Now, Netanyahu says he doesn't like social media outlets like yours, Garland. No, I would think I'll put it like this. I hope not. I'll put it like this. If Netanyahu was like, boy, that Garland Nixon on YouTube, he's my kind of guy, it'd be time for me to shut my channel down. You know, I'd be like, oh my God, Netanyahu thinks I'm doing the right thing. I better find something else to do because he's a bad guy. But at any rate, the other thing that I didn't put up there that I guess before I go, I do need to say something about is Venezuela. So Mr. Peace President is now threatening another regime change war. He's threatening another regime change war that will be a friggin' disaster if he does it. A disaster of epic proportions. He doggone it. Bush got his catastrophic morass of a war, and Trump wants his too. Venezuela. Let me first say this. While Venezuela the United States, for those who don't know, the United States sanctioned away 99% of Venezuela's finances, oil money, and then said, oh, look at that. They're a socialist country. They can't even handle their money. Well, yeah, they lost it. Can you imagine? You know anybody who could lose 99% of the money they got coming in to pay their bills and still make it? And then somebody's like, boy, that Garland's really poor with his money. He lost 99% of his income and he still can't make it. It was absurd. But they don't have a particular powerful military because they haven't had the money. And the main reason that the U.S. is going after them and the West is going after them is because they have the largest oil reserves in the world. That should tell you all you need to do. So the Trump team has sent submarines and destroyers or whatever, a bunch of some naval flotilla down there, I guess, to threaten and or attack the Venezuelans. Let me hit you with two things. Number one, the MAGA people and lots of other people specifically said, we do not want regime change wars. And Trump said, yes, we got to stop the regime change wars. And so what is his plan? Oh, Maduro's a narco terrorist and we have to go after him. So therefore, what are you going to go in Colombia or Peru where all the cocaine goes from? Nah. Mexico, where they're making all kinds of putting chemicals together and making all kinds of artificial drug. No. Are you going to go after the money? There's all this money coming into the banks, all this drug money. Maybe perhaps you'll try to go after that. Absolutely not. What are you going to do to stop the inflow of drugs? We're going to go after the guy with the most oil, like we always do, because we're lying, like we always are. We always go after the country with the most oil. What country are you guys going after? The one with the most oil. I'll say this. Venezuela ain't the country you want to go after, brother. Not the country you want to go after. I'm going to tell you right now, you may fire some missiles. I mean, come on. You can't defeat Yemen. You got your asses kicked by Iran. I mean, splattered by Iran. Now you're going to go after Venezuela. So what are you going to do? So let's just say you stand off and you fire some weapons at their bases, some Tomahawk missiles or whatever the hell, some this missile, that missile at their bases, or at the presidential palace, whatever. Of course, everybody's figured out now that you always want to do a decapitation strike. So you're going to try to take out Maduro or the leaders of the country, whatever the case may be. You're going to try this at some point. And my brother used to always say, he was a military guy. At some point, you got to put a man with a rifle. You got to send in a man with a rifle. And let me just say this, he ain't going to be the only one. They have armed everybody to the teeth. Millions of people in their militias with AK-47s. And it'll be like a roach motel. Roaches come in, but they don't come out. They're like, we have 4,000 Marines. Let me tell you something. Send 4,000 Marines into Venezuela. They're done. They go into a town, into a city, on the street, man, they're going to get lit up. The body bags. You can bomb from a distance, maybe. I think they have some S-300s, tell you the truth. If I'm not mistaken, I think they may have some S-300s. And wouldn't it be surprising if very quietly, maybe China or Russia or somebody had helped to supply them with some air defense stuff? Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know what they have as far as air defense, but I wouldn't imagine it's anything too intricate, but you never know, right? It could be surprising. They could have some offensive missiles. I don't know. We don't know right now. But my point is, you can fire some missiles in there. You got 4,000 Marines. It's a country of 30 million people. Millions are in the militia. 4,000 Marines. How they gonna make it into Caracas? They'll get lit up. If they get on, if you put boots on the ground, I don't think any of them will come home alive. Tell you the truth, because think about a country, and I've been there and traveled around and talked to people. A country, men, women. Oh, the women gonna be armed. The women are armed. The government. Think about. See. Here's the thing to think about Venezuela. I went there. This is a government where the government armed the people. Why? Would the government arm the people here? No, because the people here are like, our government is oppressive and we must be able to defend ourselves against an oppressive government. That ain't the way they feel in Venezuela. They're like, we will defend our government and our country against an invader. So they're fighting with the government against you. And they got AK-47s and they got 7.62 millimeter rounds. And they're going to come right straight down Broadway, right between your freaking eyes, if you're a friggin' Yankee and you put your feet on the ground in Venezuela. Don't do it, Trump. Don't do it. No, all you can do is fly over and bomb and kill some innocent civilians. That you can do. To what end? Might I add, could you start a war in South America that could spread, that they could go to attack other bases in areas in the US? Other bases in areas in South America? That could happen. Let me add this, Mr. I'm going to do something about immigration. We got too many Venezuelan immigrants. Hey, I think that the border needs to be secured. I'm not going to say I don't think the border needs to be secured, but what did I say all along? I said, you go to these countries, you overthrow the countries, you turn the whole country into a banana plantation, you destabilize the whole region, and then you wonder why people from a region that you destabilized all show up on your damn border. Now, just out of curiosity, all the people who think Trump is going to do something to stop immigration, after, in fact, 3 months into Donald Trump's administration, he said, well, I've gotten some calls from some of my business friends, and they said, that we need immigrants for certain things. So we're going to back off on some of the areas. In other words, we're going to do some PR stunts, but we're backing off. This was bullcrap all along. We were never really going to do it because the rich people are the ones that use the very, very low paying labor of undocumented immigrants, right? So what do you think is going to happen at the border? If you destabilize a country of 30 million, you think people are going to cross the border into Colombia, wherever? You think they're not going to head it to U.S.? But what are you going to do, Trump? Hey, we're going to do something, and we're going to start a war in Venezuela. Whoa, holy crap. We got 1 million refugees on the border. And might I add, that under international law, if there's a war going on and they're running from violence and war, they actually have a legal foundation for claiming refugee status. So what will you have? You'll have 1 million Venezuelans and others who come in and say, there's a war going on in our region, in our country, nearby, there's bombing going on, whatever, and we got to get out of there, so we're claiming refugee status. And under international law, they'll have legal grounds for making that claim. Is that what we want? Another 1 million refugees at the border? Mr. I'm going to do something about immigration at the border again? Regime change wars, neocons, more immigration at the border, ending wars, not starting them. Donald Trump, I'm going to tell you the way I worded it on my Facebook page. This is the way I worded it. I said, let me find it. I put, Trump is just another regime change war, tax cuts for the rich, break every campaign promise, genocidal fascist. That's all he is. Just another guy. I'm doing regime change wars when I swore I wouldn't. Oh, I'm going to look out for the little guy, but I'm going to make tax cuts that mostly go to the rich, that drives we're up to 37 trillion in a budget deficit now. The guy who's going to fix the budget deficit, he's concerned about, we've got to strengthen him. I'm not, they're overspending, blah, blah, blah. No, what do you need for the Pentagon? Another 150 billion. So bottom line is, his campaign promises were like Joe Biden's. They meant nothing. They meant zilcho. So we will see. Wouldn't it be a mess if the Trump administration says, that's it, we're going to fire some, I don't know, tomahawks at Venezuela? And what happens if Venezuela, it's unbeknownst to them, they got some nasty missiles. In this day and age, you saw what happened with the Houthis. You couldn't do a damn thing with the Houthis. What happens if Venezuela has some Onyx missiles? They're nasty, nasty missiles. What happens if they've got some late model anti-shipping missiles? And you attack them, and they say, okay, you attacked us. If the United States attacks Venezuela, Venezuela has a right to defend themselves, don't they? You attack them, they're going to shoot back. Things didn't work out so well. We were ducking and dodging and planes falling overboard and everything else, lying about what happened with to the F-18 in the Red Sea against Yemen. What happened is Venezuela has some Onyx missiles. What happens if they got some nasty anti-shipping missiles? Because there are some nasty ones out there. And they unleash some on some American ships. All right, we got a bunch of ships off the coast of Venezuela. What did the old folks used to say? The same thing will make you laugh, will make you cry. Okay. What happens if the U.S. says, Venezuela's nothing to us, we're not scared of them, or we'll just fire some missiles into Caracas and blow up whatever, we'll attack some bases with missiles and whatever, we'll fire on them, and the U.S. does that, and Venezuela unleashes a couple salvos of anti-ship missiles, not anti-ship missiles, salvos of anti-ship missiles, salvos. Now, again, Iran, if somebody said Iran will help, Iran and Venezuela are very tight, and Iran's got a lot of missiles, really, really good missiles. What happens? Maybe even not if, but when Venezuela unleashes a salvo of anti-ship missiles at this ship, a salvo at that ship, and the damn people are sitting in that ship looking at the radar, and they're like, uh-oh, what? We've detected a launch. We've got ships coming at missiles coming at us. How many? 20. Oh, well, how many can we stop? Of those missiles? Yeah, none. We can try. We might get a couple of, we may get a couple, but the likelihood is we're going to get hit by half of them, all of them, majority of them. What do you think an Onyx missile is going to do if it smacks into the side? And then soon as one of those missiles hit the powder hole, the powder room where all the gunpowder is, where the ammunition is, sky high. What do you think America is going to say if a couple of those ships fire on Venezuela and Venezuela fires back and a couple of those ships go up in fireballs with 100 sailors here, 200 sailors, 300 sailors there? Then what? Then what's the plan? Okay, we're in a full-scale war now. Let's send some. What are you going to do? If you get into a war with Venezuela at some point, you're going to have to put soldiers on the ground. No, you better not do that in Venezuela. You best not to do that in Venezuela. Remember, Venezuela is a tropical rainforest, all that stuff. Can you say Vietnam? But everybody's armed. Everybody. You better damn not put soldiers on the ground or they're going to get chewed to pieces. It's easy to start a war. That will be a humiliating loss. At that point, you start that war, Trump. You're at war in the Middle East. You're at war in Ukraine. Now you're at war with South America, and you're going to lose all three of them. So we'll see what happens. At any rate, thank you very much. I certainly appreciated everybody taking time out of their busy schedule to watch my show. Let me just add this. If you can afford it, oh, there's my P.O. box. By the way, if you want to, send anything, if you want to send, I get letters, I get patches from where people used to work, donations, books, you name it. So there's my P.O. box. Follow me on Rockfin and Telegram and all that stuff. If you can afford it, become a Patreon member. That's great. We got PayPal. You can donate there. Buy me a coffee, which is easy enough. You just do a one-time donation, or it'll ask you, do you want to make it monthly? Just like Patreon. Buy me a coffee is easy. And of course, Cash App, whatever you can afford. Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate it. Share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I forgot to do something. I must look and see, are there any super chats? Let's look for super chats. That would be fair. Benny Hill says, what's your take on the USA trying to steal Venezuela's oils and lithium? Forgive me if I spelled. No, you're right. So I'm glad I covered that. Thank you very much. Sean says, as the U.S. becomes bogged down in Ukraine, will it ever pivot entirely to Asia? I don't see how. I don't see they ever get out of that disaster. They instead of getting out of wars, they're just trying to start another one. Oh, we'll take Venezuela and get all their oil. Yeah, that ain't going. They're just going to get bogged down in another regime change war. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I just want to make sure I covered all of my super chats. Peace. I'm out.